to give you, I'm afraid, some rather sad news. First of all, then, can I really thank Kehinde Andrews for agreeing to be our lecturer tonight. We're really honoured, and can I say this is... We're pleased to welcome him as now Professor Kehinde Andrews. There are certainly no other professors of Black Studies, so he's unique, so we are uniquely honoured to have him with us tonight. People, I know a lot of you will have been following him. He's what I'd call, politely, he's a bit of a disruptor. And that makes me think that if Bernie was alive today, they'd be the best of mates. We also want to thank Bidisha and Joseph Harker, who are here, for agreeing to be a part of our panel, and of course, as ever, our fabulous chair, Dotun Adebayo, who's going to keep us all in order in a minute. And thank you all for coming. This is something that the Birmingham Grant Trust does every year, and we intend to keep on doing so. As you see, we're very selective in who we ask to give our lectures. The Trust has had quite an important year this year because we got a very substantial Heritage Lottery grant to actually use our archive to bring it to the attention of young people. And we've had tremendous response to the programs that we're offering. One of them is our Heritage Ambassadors scheme, and I think they're here. Where are you? They're all being trained to collect oral histories, and they're about to go around with microphones recording the experience of those people that were involved in the race-related struggles of that 83 to 93 decade. And we think that what they produce will be quite fascinating, and in keeping with the Trust's objectives, and also in keeping with Bernie's views and his anxiety that we do actually record history as we go along. And what they record will be added to the archive and therefore posterity. We had, I think, 30 places to offer in that scheme, and we had over 80 applicants, which we were delighted about. So it proves there is a lot of interest amongst young people in what we are proposing. And I have to say, we started out saying it's for young people, but we've got a lot of complaints for the old ones, so we've had to let some of them in too to train to be our heritage ambassadors. But we welcome them. They're a great bunch, and we really wish them well as they start to go out doing their work. We also had a similar response to our programme to attract young producers to develop artistic products based or inspired by the archive, by the struggles that took place in that period. Again, we've had far more applicants than we've got places for. We're going to try and accommodate who we can, but it's incredibly encouraging. And we hope it will also encourage the Heritage Lottery to give more money to programmes of this kind in the future. And finally, as I said at the beginning, we have some rather sad news. Those of you that have been to this lecture before, you'll have seen me standing here next door to the chair of our trust, Narendra Mukherjee. Sadly, we got the news on Thursday that he'd collapsed, had a heart attack and couldn't be saved. So we are very, very sad indeed that he is not here with us, that we won't see him again. He was a great friend of mine and of Bernie's, did tremendous work in building the movement for black sections in the Labour Party and for black rights, both nationally and indeed internationally. He was part of a movement with Bernie to try and build networks across Europe of black people. So we are very sad indeed. So a lot of you here will have known him and be quite shocked that we lost him so soon. So if I could ask you just to stand just for a few minutes in memory of Narendra Mukherjee. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now I'm going to hand over to Dotun Adebayo, who's going to take us through the rest of the evening. Dotun.
A truly, excuse me, a truly great man who, I'm sorry, give me one moment. Welcome to the Bernie Grant Arts Centre. It's an amazing place, as those of you who use it will know. I'm hoping that many of you will use it often. We're about to embark on a new, if you like, trajectory in our journey. It's been here 10 years. We owe it very much to the endeavours of Sharon, who spoke so admirably at the beginning there, and who is the Secretary of the Bernie Grant Trust. We've got fabulous, absolutely fabulous new artistic director in Hannah Z. Poole, who has got a programme of excellence for you that I'm sure will make all of you proud. For the many young people who are here, I will say one thing: you've got to seize the time, you've got to take the opportunity to use this amazing venue, to tell people about it and to bring people in, because it is what you make it to be. When I say seize the time, I think back to my own education. I grew up in Tottenham at a time in the late 70s when some of you who are going around getting those oral histories might want to come to me and I can tell you what it was like growing up here from 1968 onwards. Whilst I was at university where I studied philosophy, I once asked my lecturer if I could study African philosophy. And my lecturer told me, and he was a wonderful person, so I'm not making any, I'm not disparaging him whatsoever, but he said, there's no such thing. And I remarked that a lot of what I was studying, purportedly by Aristotle and Plato, was very similar to the words of wisdom my grandmother used to give me in Nigeria, and she had never studied Aristotle or Plato. And I'd never heard of black studies at that time, so this would have been in the 1980s. But it was there in many small ways. The great thing about today's keynote speaker is he's brought it together. He is the first professor of black studies in this country, and he feels that this is a subject that should be part of the everyday at schools and in universities. Many of us will know why. When we look outside of our doors and we see some of the mayhem that's been caused on our streets, not necessarily by black youth, by the way, we know what's missing in a lot of young people's lives is an understanding, and this is white and black youths, an understanding of black studies. When I grew up here, we didn't know the difference between black and white. I didn't know the meaning of racial discrimination. I genuinely didn't, because I remember the first time I ever heard the phrase, because there'd been a documentary about the National Front on television, and this friend of mine of undetermined racial origins, I seem to remember, his name was Terry Tarzan, but that was his genuine name, and he said, "Oi, Don, in those days I spoke like that a bit, and he said, Don, did you see that programme the other day about all those people who believe in racial discrimination?" And I said, "Racial what?" And generally that's how we were. So the more that we understand where we're all coming from, the better a society we will have. I understand genuinely where most of my white friends are coming from. They don't understand genuinely the trajectory of my life and our lives, and when I say our lives, communally, what we bring it together. Anyway, back to Professor Andrews. I'm hoping he'll touch on some of these subjects tonight. I spoke to him on Sunday on my radio programme, and he was well behaved. I had to tell him, look, stop being well behaved. Stop being well behaved. You're a firebrand, so light the fire now. And as soon as I said that, he got what I wanted, and he lit the fire, and it's still burning. Imagine what he can do tonight. Please, I urge you to listen to every nuance of what this great speaker has to offer you tonight. Afterwards, we'll have a conversation with the incredible Bidisha, who, when I say sees the time younger people, you need to have a word with her, because she sees the time when she was just a teenager, and still has written some of the best literature in this country. I'll tell you more about that in a moment or two. But Joseph Harker as well, from The Guardian, who is, I'm sure, the longest serving comment editor at The Guardian at this stage, amongst other things, and the founder of Britain's first, if you like, I dare not say buppy, but newspaper. Anyway, listen to what Kehinde Andrews, Professor Kehinde Andrews has got to say, and afterwards we'll open up the floor as well to all of you. So if you've got questions, keep them in mind. But first now, let us welcome onto the stage our keynote speaker for this year's Bernie Grant Trust Speech Memorial Lecture, Professor Kehinde Andrews.
All right, hello, thank you. I don't want to disappoint. Like, that's a good introduction. So no, thank you. It's great to see so many people here. It's great to be here. It's an honor for me. Bernie Grant. So Bernie Grant's one of the people who passed really before I would have had any experience in my political life, but really has been important. We all know Bernie Grant. It's like a name that we just know and grew up with. And actually, preparing for this lecture, I didn't realize the extent to which Bernie Grant had been involved in lots of different things. Sharon actually sent me some stuff from the archive. So it's a Bishopsgate, right? It's the archive. And they were he was leading the development of a black university. Actually, this was a black university project back in 1992. So I was reading through some of that stuff and just thinking about how the connections to that moment in '92 and where we are now are really important, actually. I mean, so I really recommend you check out the archive. I mean, there's one of the things we don't do that well, actually, is keep hold of our stuff. Like, we've had a long history in this country, particularly post-war, but you can go back further than post-war. And there's a generation of people who, when they passed, and we're having losses now. If we don't really document that history is gone, right? So when there are archives, you really should go and see them. So the Bishopsgate, George Padmore Institute above New Beacon Books has an archive, which I really recommend you go in and have a look at some of this stuff. So one of the things I was looking at was the minutes from a meeting it was '92, and they had this meeting in the Imperial Hotel, which is an important part of the story. And actually, some people I know, a few people I know in circles here, and they were discussing this, should we have this black university? One of the things that stuck out is when we started to do this Black Studies project, it started back in 2013, I want to say 2013, 2012, 2013, before the degree, before Professor, before any of that stuff. It started off with a group of us, very similar, right, meeting around the table, some of the same people actually, I know, meeting around the table and saying, well, actually, how do we deal with this problem, and how do we put black knowledge into the university? And it just struck me as so reminiscent. Also, one of the things that was reminiscent was the conversations they were having, this whole discussion about black, actually, this definition of black. They actually renamed it the African University Project, precisely because of this language thing, right? And the whole conversation we had was, should we call it Black Studies? Can we call it Black Studies? Which I might get into and I might not, I'm not sure. Depends how much firebrand you want. But the other thing which is important about that story is it broke down because they were going to do a summer school, and they had this connection with this American university, and African American, like what they call it, HBCU, Historically Black College and University, and it broke down. And it broke down because of one of the black professor actually who was organising this thing. And this is also very reminiscent for the conversation we're going to have today, because as much as I am going to criticise the institutions, we also have to criticize ourselves, right? We are not always our best friend. We are sometimes our worst enemy in a lot of these things. And actually, when we're looking at Black studies, what Black studies can be and how it can be, that's a really important lesson to take away, right? So that was kind of how I came into this. How are we going to have this conversation about Black studies? And 92, well, that's like what? That's almost 30 years ago now. I don't do maths, right? I'm not a professor of maths. So almost 30 years ago there. But the same conversations. And that should also tell you something. Because Black Studies is new for academia here. But in America, it's the 50th anniversary of Black Studies this year. 50th anniversary. Our Black Studies degree, the only Black Studies degree in Europe, is in its second year. Right? So that should just tell you something, right, about the state of things in the UK. And then we had these conversations in the UK almost 30 years ago, and it took that long to really get change, or well, to really get something. I don't know if we can call it change. The other thing I have to say, quick correction. Actually, there is another professor of Black Studies, but she's a white woman in Edinburgh who doesn't do Black Studies. So I'm not sure we can count it. Sorry, I'm not going to say anything more about it. So Black Studies. So before I go into a bit about what it is, why it's important, the moment that brought Black Studies about is really important. Like actually, the reason we have Black Studies, why Bernie Grant was having this meeting with academics in the Imperial Hotel in '92, is because the university is white. It's a white space. It may be the whitest space that exists and has existed. There's a quote which, if you've heard me talk about it before, I always use this quote. It's a quote that I wish I had come up with, but I didn't. So I have to give credit to Deepa Nayak, who organises This Is Not a Gateway festival here in London. She said, the university is not racist. The university is racism, right? That's how we have to understand the university. Like, the idea that I am not a human being, that most of us in this room are not human beings, was not just some random idea that came from fascists on the far right. That was an idea that was perpetuated, that was actually created, formalized in universities, right? We were given this promise at the university, the Enlightenment would change the way that we think about the world, would get rid of the old forms of dogma and religious understandings, and everything was supposed to change. But somehow the Bible justified slavery, and then the university justified slavery too, right? And not just justified it, the universities really embedded it. So it made it scientific, gave proof that I am not a human being, that you are not human beings, right? Some of the most heralded academics today firmly believe that. So one of the disruptive things I did once was to say that the Enlightenment was racist on Newsnight. Well, the Enlightenment was obviously racist. I mean, like, that's not really a controversial statement. Like, if you read any of the Enlightenment thinkers, they were racist, like openly racist. Immanuel Kant, who actually anybody read Immanuel Kant? Yeah. A couple of people. I didn't even know people knew who Immanuel Kant was. But to say Immanuel Kant's racist, it's mad. People really defend Immanuel Kant. But actually, a big chunk of his back catalogue was just writing about how savage people in Africa were. Actually had a map, right, that said that Europe, because of the climate, was where science and civilization grew from, and Africa was backward, savage, dark land, right? I mean, the Enlightenment was just obviously racist. Not just only was it racist, it was really the beginning of white identity politics, right? This notion of the Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment, briefly, is this idea that civilization and science comes out of Europe, comes out of this dark age and spreads its light around the world. Well, that would be fine, other than at the point where the Enlightenment came, the only place that was in a dark age was Europe, right? Literally. Like, I mean, Africa, Asia, China, they have an unbroken civilization for thousands and thousands of years, right? And if you actually look at the Enlightenment, it drew heavily on India, Africa, Arab scholars, Muslim scholars, but that's all lost in this discussion of knowledge and African philosophy. There's no such thing as African philosophy. My God, the Enlightenment is African philosophy, right? So, and that's the history of the university. So I always have to push back, because there is this idea that universities are these spaces which are open and they're like these liberal spaces. That's utter nonsense. I mean, really, just look at the history of the university. The place that rationalized gave scientific justification to racism. The Nazis, when we talk about the Nazis and racial science, this again wasn't particularly controversial at the time, right? American In London, UCL, eugenics, all firmly believed that we were not human beings, right? And it's that logic which leads to the Holocaust. There's a great book by Zygmunt Bauman called Holocaust and Modernity, or Modernity and Holocaust, which I recommend you read. It actually says that the way we think about the Holocaust is totally wrong, right? We think of it as some aberration of these evil Nazis. Actually, no, the Holocaust was the logic of European ideas, just brought home to Europe. The problem is when you do it to white people in Europe, it becomes problematic. The Holocaust was just a continuation of violence against bodies who were racialized as not being. In the Congo, they killed 10 million people. 10 million people, right? So, and the university produces this, right? So that's even in the sense of structurally, right? So 50 years ago, what percentage of the population do you think went to university? Like 1965? 5% of the population. In the UK, it's pretty standard in Europe and in America. 5% of the population. That means the university was a safe space for rich white men. That's what it was, right? In fact, this is why we're having this discussion now about safe spaces in university. It's because we've invaded the safe space of rich white men and they feel very uncomfortable, right? So the university, up until 65, this is relatively recently, right? The history of these institutions is whiteness, racism, justifying slavery and colonialism, etc., etc., etc. That's where they are built, founded, that's the knowledge, which you are still taught when you go to university today. So when people ask why is your curriculum white, the question should be what on earth do you expect? Like, of course it's going to be white. Like, it's a white institution, right? And so on the 50th anniversary of Black Studies in America, so Black Studies in America had this change before we had this change. So in the 60s there is an opening up of universities in America where, used to be 5%, used to be just rich white men. They open it up. You get women going there in large numbers for the first time, working class people, people from the third world. You have LGBT communities going there. It just opens up, right? Opens up the university. And when people get into the university, they find that what they see, they're just like, what the hell is this? Like, what are you actually teaching me? Like, and at this point, it's openly racist. Like, actually teaching that there's no civilization in Africa, and actively teaching deviancy of black women, this kind of stuff, right? So if you listen to the stories of people around that time, they're just saying, we're sitting in class and we couldn't possibly accept this, right? So you see at this time it's the students, and again, really important for this moment, it's the students who are pushing change. They're saying, we don't accept this. We will not accept this teaching. We will not accept this faculty. We demand other things. So that's where you get ethnic studies, women's studies. There's a whole blossoming of these things, right? And that's where Black Studies really starts. That's where it gets its foothold. They call it a battle for Black Studies in America, and it literally was a battle, like an actual battle. So San Francisco State College, which had the first Black Studies degree in '69, had to have a 5-month-long strike of students, staff, community got involved. It was a big thing. Like, they shut down the university in order to make sure that they could have Black Studies, ethnic studies, and a diverse set of programs. At Cornell University, the 50th anniversary of this year as well, the Black students group occupied Willard Straight Hall, which was one of the student residences on campus, and they occupied it. They had threats from the Ku Klux Klan, so they were afraid, so they armed themselves. They got guns brought in, right? And there's this great picture, if anybody's seen it, where they come out as a standoffish and they walk out of this building armed to the teeth, like properly armed to the teeth. They walk out of this building and they got this snap of. But that's when we say a battle. That's a real battle, right? Like, there was a proper battle to say that we have to have something different, and this has to fundamentally change, right? In the UK, it's been slightly different, right? I'm not walking around with no arm. I'm not getting armed to the teeth. We're not doing that. And actually, but the fact that it's different is also important as well. Our battle has been a battle of position more than a battle of actual battle, right? So when people ask why does it take so long for Black Studies here, one of the reasons is so the universities don't really expand until the 90s, like it's later on, right? Migration patterns, I mean, there's not that many of us in the country in the 60s. So the first generation really where you have lots and lots and lots of black young people, it's more in the 90s. So my university, Birmingham City University, is like one of these new universities. So that's when you have that first massification of higher education. So it's later on. And then the students don't really feel they have a voice until now, right? This has been a big problem. This has been a huge problem. And the other problem is simply a matter of staff, right? So it's 1.1% of all academic staff in the UK are black. 1.1%. It gets worse as you go higher up, right? So it's 1.1% in generally speaking. Then as you get to professors, so I'm now a black professor, there are only 126, yeah, there were 125, like I was, so 126 black professors in the whole country, right? So there are 19,000 professors in the United Kingdom. 126 are black, 35 of those are black women, right? And then when you take the numbers of people who are who were born in the UK, it's even worse, right? So there just isn't really that many of us. Like, there's so few of us. It's the idea you'd have black studies, you couldn't really have that conversation. There's a big difference actually between the 92 conversation they were having in the Imperial Hotel and the conversation we were having. We were having a conversation it was Newman University at that time. Everybody was employed in academia. I mean, the fact that Bernie Grant, an MP, was leading that conversation in a hotel tells you just how bad the racism was at that point. Like, we couldn't have this. There's no chance I'd have my job I have now in 92. This would not be a conversation would be convening, right? So there has been somewhat of a shift where it's a bit better, but it's still absolutely fundamentally terrible. And when you go further, obviously it gets even worse. So I'm not that old, and I am the most senior black person in the entire university. Right, the entire university. I've only been there for a few years and I'm not that old. And I'm currently the most senior black person in my university. And I was also the most senior black person in my university before I got promoted. Right? So, it's that bad, right? I mean, we don't have any black managers senior at all. We don't have one. And that's not surprising. Now, you find that across most universities. There is only one university currently that is run by a black person, a black woman, Baroness Amos, who runs SOAS, yeah, and that's it. In fact, for the last 3 years, there's been nobody, right? So it's when you ask structurally why there are no black studies, it's a very simple answer, right? So our battle for black studies was, again, it's more of a war of position, where we had to just deal with the situation that we had. So we had these conversations. First, it was at Newman University. And we're having this conversation about black studies, what we're going to do. And so we founded it on research. So black studies as research first, right? Books, we had 2 major conferences, really big networks. We have this international network of black studies scholars. Black feminism has been a really important part of that, actually. So some of the key figures that we work with, Professor Patricia Collins from the University of Maryland, Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. I'm hoping that I keep trying to get to come and do an event. I promise there'll be an event, and it'll be a good one as well when it happens. So we kind of had this, well, we weren't thinking about a degree, because like I said, at this point, it's me, had one, Lisa Palmer, we had one black colleague at Newman. That was it, like, that was it for the whole university. No, there was one other black person employed in the whole entire university, right? So the idea of having a black studies degree, it was never on the table. Now what happened was I got a job at Birmingham City University, and they made me too senior, basically. That was the problem, right? So I went in there and said, we're going to do black studies and do black studies research, and brought all this research endeavor, had to be world leading research and bringing in money and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the department's growing at the same time, so we're getting all these jobs, and you've got me on the panel, and we hired a number of black people. We actually hired 3 black women in a row, which is an achievement I'll never match ever in my entire academic career. Like, literally impossible. Like you say, like, that kind of thing doesn't happen in university. Like, it doesn't happen. So it got to the point in 2016, and now we actually have six full-time employed black academics in the same department. And when I tell you that is totally and utterly unprecedented, I'm not joking. 6, we have more black people in our one department than there are employed in most of the universities in the UK. All right, that's how bad it is. So it's still that bad. So I don't want to be like, we got a black studies degree, don't start thinking that, everything's changed. It has not changed. This is a very site-specific thing, which is mostly about luck and who was involved, etc., etc. And we managed to pull people together into this critical mass, right? So that's allowed us to run the course. So when I went to the managers and said, well, let's do black studies, it was like, well, why not do black studies? Like, we're the only place that can do it. We are currently the only place that can do it, because nobody else has the staff to do it, right? So I get asked about black studies a lot. You know, can we replicate it? But if you ain't got no black people, then no, you can't replicate it, right? I mean, it's not really complicated. It's like impossible, right? But strangely, there hasn't really been any push to really employ people, right? I mean, it's a very simple thing, just employ people, right? People are there, people do PhDs, lots of people. So that's why I say it's not changed as much as we'd like to think that it's changed. The other thing, I'm going to do some of the negatives and I'm going to get positive. I'm going to try and end positively, promise. So the other thing about black studies, so we didn't really have this battle for black studies, right? We managed to get people employed. We have this research stuff. We made this picture of the degree. But the number one reason why we got black studies also tells you the number one problem with black studies in the university, right? 2017 was when we first launched the degree. 2017 is also an important year in higher education policy. Anybody know what happened in 2017? The big shift in 2017. What was it? Not even REF, Black students. Something massive change. So we can have as many students as we like. And it's only because of that we got Black Studies. And the university saw very clearly this is new, it's distinctive, nobody else can do it. I just said, well, only one in Europe, and they went, yeah. They got really excited, really happy. They're still happy about it. Right? So it's fresh money, right? Yeah, but that's it. So really, think about that for a second. We can only have the degree because students pay £9,000 a year. Wow. So that should tell you something, right? That should tell you something about why I'm a little bit skeptical. Even though I had the Professor of Black Studies, I have to say I'm a little bit skeptical sometimes of the project, because what can happen very easily is that we can fall into the trap of the university, and we can definitely fall into the trap of neoliberalism, right? The university is not just a white space now, it's one of the main spaces of neoliberalism. It's individualized, you pay, it's marketized, it's all ranked, so we have all these different ranks. It's extraordinarily expensive to go to university. I don't think I could afford. I went to one of the whitest universities there is, still one of the whitest universities, the University of Bath, or Bath, I think I'm supposed to say. And I don't think I could have gone. My family's not even, my family's doing okay, but I don't think I could have afforded to go in this current system because of just how much everything costs. It's so expensive. Student accommodation is £150 a week. A week. That's mad. That's more than I pay my mortgage. That's like a chunk more than I pay my mortgage, right? Madness. So we're really pricing our students, but that's the environment that gets you Black Studies. In fact, a lot of the debate we're having now about decolonizing, I know you've heard of decolonizing the university, the attainment gap. The only reason they care about any of this stuff is money. It's about finance, it's about market, right? One of the ways in which universities get ranked, so if you're in this league table, completely racist. The league table is totally and utterly racialized league table. The places at the top are the white places. The places at the bottom are places like my university, 50% ethnic minority. And this is for two reasons. Two of the main metrics are attainment, how many get good degrees. Now the data tells you very clearly that if you're from an ethnic minority, and this is just from an ethnic minority, right, you are significantly less likely to get a 2-1 or a first. Significantly less likely. Now, as academics, and I've been guilty of this, we criticize the schools all the time, right? Attainment gap, isn't it bad, etc., etc. There is no attainment gap based solely on not being white in the schools. As we know, GCSEs, A-levels, some minorities do better, a lot better, Indian, Chinese in particular, some minorities don't do as well, right? Black, Caribbean don't do as well. So actually, the average is that. If you actually look at white and non-white, average, right? However, in university, that doesn't count. Even if you are from a high-performing ethnic minority, you are still significantly less likely to get a 2-1 or a first. It's worse in the university than it is in the school. So I'm saying this, the university is not this space that you think it is, right? The university is this terribly racist space, right? And because of that attainment gap, means that if you're one of the university like my university, 50% ethnic minorities, automatically you have a penalty because you're not going to be doing as well as another university. Because this attainment gap is pretty solid across all courses, across all class groups as well. It's across all universities. Even like, you may think Oxford is more racist than BCU, Birmingham City University. It's not. It's actually exactly the same amount of racist. It's the institution of university. Right? The other thing that holds back universities in the league tables with lots of minorities is the other key metric is employment, and particularly graduate employment. Now, you are significantly less, almost 7 times less likely to get a good job if you're a black graduate. Doesn't matter what you get, doesn't matter if you get first or 2-1, far less likely to get a job or a good job afterwards, right? Which means that universities like mine are penalized straight away, right? So that's why you're hearing all this stuff about attainment gap. What do we do? How do we get students jobs? Because they didn't care before, now all of a sudden they care, because it's bottom line, it's league table, it's money, right? It's this whole thing, this whole neoliberal game that's being played. I said I was going to get positive. Promise. It's coming. Believe me. It's coming. The other thing that we have to be careful of, so we've taken a lot of inspiration from America. So America has the first Black Studies course, 50 years of Black Studies, and this is to be celebrated. But the Black Scholar, which is the oldest Black Studies journal in America, is going to run an special issue on the 50th anniversary of Black Studies. The title is something like the lines of, they haven't got it exactly, but something along the lines of, what on earth did we do to Black Studies? Right? They're looking back saying, what went wrong? Because this was not supposed to be what it is. It's not what it was supposed to be. All right? Black Studies was supposed to be what they called the science of liberation. Something that would transform how we do higher education. What it has largely become, unfortunately, is just a white university in blackface. I'll be honest, I have a lot of colleagues in African American studies, so that has it been recorded? I don't get in trouble. But I think there's people understand this, right? Like it's essentially become as mimicking what the rest of the university does, just with black people, right? I mean, okay, I'm going to tell the story, but I'm going to not tell you where it was, because I actually know people here, so all right, so, I mean, I go to American universities quite a lot, and the amount of money they have in American universities would absolutely surprise a poor one of the two, right? I mean, they are flooded with money. I would get paid literally double what I get paid now, and I actually get paid quite well. That's how much money there is. And I was at a university that had so much money, African American Studies Department had so much money, the end of the financial year, it was around about this time of year, end of the financial year, the dean calls in the head of the department and says, you've got $675,000 you forgot to spend. Right? And imagine that. I mean, it's imagine like, anybody in university does that. Like, you just forgot. Like, you have that much money you forgot to spend $675,000. So, head of the department goes around to all the staff. Says, look, here's $75,000 each. Right? Spend it wherever you like. No limit. You spend it wherever you like. Right? Half of them can't actually think what to spend it. Imagine, like, I don't know. He said, forget it. Give it back. I mean, that's crazy. Worst part of the conversation is a young guy who's not at this university. He's at a different university, and we're having this meeting. Head of the department, young guy, having this conversation, and his first response, not joking, is, "Oh wow, I would have bought some furniture." Alright, and I'm sitting there like, what? I don't even have my own office, so like, I'm not my furniture, but I don't do that. But that just tells you just the level of institutionalization, right? They had the money in the first, it doesn't get spent, and then that's the idea. The young people, it's not open, young people have this kind of mentality around, right? And it's become, Black Studies has become African American Studies and has become, I would say, largely, not completely, there are some very good African American Studies scholars and there are some good departments, but largely has become divorced from its original mission. So what Black Studies wanted to do in the first instance was this idea of the science of liberation. It's about saying, actually, what we don't, the problem isn't that we're not in the bubble, the problem is the bubble, right? This is the conversation we're having currently about when they use the word decolonizing the university. Actually, I'm going to mention Malcolm X for the first time in like 25 minutes. I've not mentioned Malcolm X, it's like a record. And there's this word decolonizing. So Malcolm uses, he has his quote in 64 where he says, the word revolutionary is being misused. Well, the word decolonized is being totally, utterly abused, it's being stamped on and defamed immeasurably. When we talk about decolonizing the university, what they're actually talking about is diversifying the university, right? That's saying that there's a set of practices the university does, and we're excluded from them, and can we get into them and just carry on in those processes, right? So one of the reasons why I actually don't really like the professor title, actually, I got the professor this year, and then had an existential crisis after we had a whole 3-hour lecture with the students going, why are you happy, my professor, this makes no sense, etc. So this is for me, and one of the reasons is because I know what it took to get professor. He did not take anything, I won't say I'm not proud of, that's not the right word to say, but he did not take anything that's going to lead us to liberation. Put it that way. To get promoted in a university, to become professor, you have to write for academic audiences, very specific academic audiences, in journals that you couldn't access because you have to pay to access them. Worse still, even if you could access them, you wouldn't want to because they're totally boring. That's not way you read them. I've got back catalogues of the Journal of Sociology. I have never opened one of them. It's the most boring thing you'd ever do in your life. Why would you do this, right? Like, it's the way it's written, the way it's not for us, right? It really is just kind of arcane. So those are, when I apply for jobs or when I get promoted, it's those publications that count, right? The activist stuff doesn't count. Literally, I have a whole chunk of my CV that's meaningless. Literally, I might as well throw it in the bin in terms of academia, right? You also have to go to conferences with other academics that cost a lot of money. There's not like this. This is not how you get promoted. This is, in terms of promoted, meaningless. A little bit anything, right? And you have to convince people within the academy that you are worthy of the title professor, right? So I've tweeted out my professor letter, and I tweeted it on purpose, right? Because I was seeing if anybody noticed who signed my professor letter. It was the Vice Chancellor and it was the Dean of the faculty. Guess what they had in common? They're both white men. Why? Right? The whole entire panel actually was white people. No, there was an Asian guy in the panel who decided that I could be professor of Black Studies. I mean, look, it's good for me because I get paid more, but really, that is not how you should decide whether you should have credentials in Black Studies, right? And this does tell you the whole point. And going back to this, I will mention I can't remember her name even. It's so bad. This black professor, other professor of Black Studies in Edinburgh. It was this whole conversation. Well, who gave you this title of Black Studies? And it was a totally white panel who have no relationship connection to Black Studies, right? And that's how the university works, right? So it's problematic. Yeah. I was going to be positive. Positive. Yes, so the positive. Yes, sorry, no, I'm getting to the positive. So, having said all of that, right? And I'll say all of that, and our existential crisis says this, right? But there is something that university space provides, and why I would argue that this is necessary. I never talk particularly about decolonizing the university. I say that what we're doing is colonizing the university. Right? I can tell you right now that my university has not changed fundamentally because of Black Studies. It hasn't, like it really hasn't, right? Oxford University has definitely not changed because of Black Studies, right? And I don't really get it, right? What we have done is create a space within our institution where we can mobilize the resources for the betterment of our communities, right? And just on a simple individual level, there is no other job where you could do these things. I have so much access to stuff which I just couldn't have access to at time. So we started the Harambee Organisation of Black Unity in Birmingham. And this is, for me, this is the Black Radical vehicle for liberation, right? Now I was able to devote time to this as part of my research. Like when I say I'm doing research at university, that's what I'm doing, right? There's very few jobs where I'm going to get that kind of flexibility, right? Writing books about Black radicalism, going around giving talks like this, right? Having a platform, well, just be honest, if I was a professor of Black Studies, you wouldn't listen to what I was saying, right? So it's giving us a platform to actually have a completely different conversation, which kind of subverts what the university is about, right? And that's just on a personal level, right? Now, also then, structurally, the university has money, right? Not as much money as the American universities. If I had $675,000, that'd be great. We do some great stuff. But we do have some money, right? To do projects, to work with communities, even just a simple idea of the space. So, particularly in Birmingham, I think this might be a bit better in London, but particularly in Birmingham, this is no community spaces. We have so few spaces to do stuff, right? And we have this university in the middle of the city, holds 200, 300, 500 people, and until the last couple of years, nobody in our community had ever been into this building. Like this, it's almost like it's a fortress. Like you just don't cross the threshold. Ironic, given that actually university is a publicly funded institution. Even now, like this government paid these fees. Like no one's paid any money back at these. These are publicly funded institutions that people don't use, right? So we've really split that around straight away. So we now have events in the building all the time. We have like 300 people come regularly from the community into the space, using the space. And that is really useful for community organizations that don't have space to meet, right? I mean, there's just very little space. Like I said, I think London might be a bit better, but I think it's still probably, yeah. So simple things like that, right? Use the resources of the university. In terms of the organization of Black Unity, I actually have a PhD student who's doing her PhD on the organization, and she gets paid by the university. So we basically have a paid member of staff doing work in the organization, right? It's finding these ways that we can flip things and use the resources, right? And the students are great. And the one thing about this degree is that's absolutely wonderful is the students. I mean, one of the things they don't tell you about neoliberalism in universities is the most neoliberal people are the students. I mean, really are the students. I mean, in a kind of depressing way, it's the students, right? Who are driving this, let's have coffee shops, etc. No, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to do this, but the Black Studies is completely different. Like, it's totally transformative teaching a group of people who've come to say, well, look, how do we liberate? How do we get the work? How do we get the knowledge to liberate our people? That's why they're at the university, and that's a completely different way of teaching people. And again, it's things we couldn't do without. And I think this goes back to the idea that for me, Black Studies isn't a university thing, and we shouldn't think about Black Studies as being a university thing. This is the first Black Studies degree in Europe, but Black Studies has been here for a long time. You have Black History Studies here today, right? You're doing the work, right? Patrick Vernon here today doing the work. Where did I learn the stuff I learned? I didn't learn it in university. Anybody told me that I learned about Malcolm, weeks of Malcolm X, that never happened, right? Well, I learned that from parents, from sets. My first book was about Black Supplementary School Movement. There is a flyer, actually, I took my notes on the flyer for the Lemuel Finley Supplementary School 45th anniversary this year. You should go to the dinner dance. I'm going to do a good advertisement. 45th anniversary. So there is actually dinner dance on the 25th of May. There's flyers going around. I recommend you go and support. But we've had Black Studies for decades, right? And we should support that work. And that's how we keep Black Studies honest, right? If you think about Black studies as being an academic thing, it becomes like what happened in America, right?
Yeah.
And what we're saying is, it's not an academic thing. The whole point of Black studies is this community-rooted thing. When we talk about transforming the curriculum, we are literally transforming the curriculum. So if you come and learn, for our Black studies, you are going to come and learn people that you just wouldn't learn. Like, so I talk about Malcolm X all the time, but people like Claudia Jones, Amy Jakes Garvey, I mean, those are intellectuals, right? And this is one of the changes which I don't like, actually, is that when we were locked out of universities, those were our intellectuals, right? Those are the people we look to for knowledge. And those are the people you should look to for knowledge, because those are the people involved in the struggle of trying to change things, and that's how you get the knowledge that we need, right? And now we've become institutionalized where we're looking to academics for knowledge. Look, I have a lot of friends who are Black academics, so I don't want to say, I'm not saying, no, this is please be priest, but I am saying this, it's kind of a madness. I don't think if Malcolm X was alive today that we really paid that much attention. They'd be on YouTube talking and everybody would be like, everybody, like, young people would be like, I'm having this conversation today, and young people talking about, I've never heard of them. Like, who are these people? Like, I don't know these people at all. But they're connecting into a whole different range of intellectuals that we're kind of looking down and have no connection to, right? So it really is about saying, like, actually, what is the intellectual? What is knowledge? Go and cement that stuff. So when I say Malcolm X is the basis of my academic work, people at first were like, what are you talking about? It's mad, it can't be true. But it is actually fundamentally the truth, right? In terms of understanding something like racism, understanding institutions, you just go to Malcolm. Malcolm tell you stuff like 150 years before anybody else. There's this thing called critical race theory. Anybody know critical race theory? And I have friends who are critical race theorists. I have friends, actually, one of my friends was one of the founders of critical race theory, so I have to be careful with my critique of critical race theory. But critical race theory basically makes two arguments. One, civil rights changes didn't make things better, actually they probably made things worse, right? The legal legislative changes. And two, that racism is a permanent feature of our society. Now, again, I tell you, you hear that Malcolm X said that in 1962. Right? I didn't need to hear critical race theory to hear this, right? But we haven't really given that kind of that knowledge the credit that knowledge deserves. Because I think that's the knowledge we need to bring into the university, right? In fact, talking about Malcolm, I end up talking about Malcolm too much. But there was this. Somebody asked me before. I was going to say, like, somebody asked me before about what's the power of Black studies. But actually, think about someone like Malcolm X. Malcolm's involved in crime. He's ends up in prison, right? And what is it that makes Malcolm X? It isn't the Nation of Islam, actually. The Nation of Islam is important in that, but it's Black studies. Malcolm goes and starts reading. He picks up books. His alma mater was books. That's what he says. Read. Totally and utterly changed his mind. He talks about the transformation as being like snow falling off a roof. That's the power of Black studies, right? That's what our young people need to know today. And that's what's missing. I mean, for me, that's what's missing, right? And I think that's what we had much more of historically with things like the Saturday School Movement, with that community education, where we were teaching our kids the knowledge that they needed for them to become different people, right? And so this is why it's really important. But this is also why I say that I will back Black studies in the university to the extent that it makes sense. To the extent that it makes sense, I'll probably end up leaving. If it doesn't make sense, I'll probably end up leaving the university. And that's fine, right? Like, we don't need these spaces to justify our knowledge. To the extent we can use them, we should use them, but they're not the be-all and end-all, and they're not the most important thing in them. And what we really should be doing is saying, well, how do we leverage these spaces to create the kind of Black studies that we need? And the kind of Black studies that we need is the Black studies that's on the street. It's the Black studies in our communities. It's the Black studies that is studying in organizations, right? So one of the projects that we have at the Ramsey Organization of Black Unity, we focused on education. It's really education. Adult education, young people education, Saturday schools, reading groups. It's that kind of stuff, right? And because of my position in the university, I can take books out, we can do stuff, we can leverage some of that resources. But for me, that's the real site, right? The university is fine, we do what we can do, but the site for Black studies has to be at site, because that's what keeps Black studies honest. If you just become something within the bubble of academia, it's not worth it, right? I would say it's genuinely not worth it. And in 10 years' time, you hear me talking about this, saying, the university is great, university is wonderful, I've sold out, and you should stop listening to me, right? Right there. So, I think I need to stop, right? Stop.
You've got time, you go.
2 minutes, all right. So I think that's kind of the message that I want to really give. The battle for Black studies is not academic. It is not just a battle in the university. It is definitely not a battle for recognition in the university at all. What it is a battle for is to say that actually, wherever we are, that we can mobilize the resources that we have to really bring study back into our activism and our mobilizations. Kwame Ture visited Birmingham in '83, and I got the videos, I really want to put them online. And he says a whole speech: if you're not studying, you're not trying. You know, stop complaining, stop talking, let's study, right? Now, I think this is something we've kind of gone away from, because in some ways we have access to far more information than we've ever had. But it's breadth of information, it's not depth of information, right? I don't want to end on the bad story. No, but I gotta tell it, no. So my African-American colleague I had actually, and he's, because I don't want to, because no, you know, I'm not gonna tell it, it's all right. So, no. Yeah, no, I went to it. All right, so, no, because I don't want to be like I'm acting going against young people. I love young people. Young people, actually, if you look at who's making these arguments, who's creating the space for black studies, who's pushing the idea about anti-race, it's black people, it's the young people, it's young people. It's young people on the 3,000 people on the street in Birmingham the other day for Black Lives Matter protests, right? It's young people. So I really don't know much, it's not an anti-young people thing at all. And actually, also, one thing I always say is, I mean, it actually is kind of depressing going and talking to working class black young people sometimes in university. I mean, if you want an audience that don't want to know about struggle, it's them, right? It really is, right? Because they're in the university to get money. But if that's, I can't blame them, they're young people, right? That means that we have failed as a generation to teach our young people what's important. So that's our fault. So it's not a critique about young people at all. But there's an African-American colleague I have, and he had a student in the class, and they had a t-shirt that said, Asata taught me, Asata Shakur, who's she basically was French, she was part of the Black Liberation Front. Well, she wasn't a Black Panther, it was a Black Liberation Front, I think it was called. Black Liberation Army. And there was a shootout with the police. She didn't do it, but she was locked up in prison. She managed to escape and has been living in Cuba for decades now. It's like 20, 30 years now. They're still trying to, there's still a $2 million bounty on her head. It's a really great book you should read. Asata, the autobiography of Asata Shakur, really excellent book, and there's a great song actually by Common called "Song for Asata," which I actually heard about Asata, and Asata taught me. So the lecture was, the professor's like, so what did Asata teach you? The guy literally said, I'm not joking, he said to her, I don't even know who she is. Right? So, no, the sentiment, I love the sentiment, the teacher said, we really have to be going and studying, and what does that mean, right? But again, I'm not blaming young people, this is our fault, because that's a deficit on our side, where we haven't put that learning and stuff in. I wouldn't have got away with that as yoga, I'd have got beaten if I come away with that. So we failed. So I think that's what the battle for black studies is. It's not an academic thing. It's how do we really build the stuff in the community, with young people, with older people as well, because let's not pretend old people, one of the really interesting things we've had is older people come to the degree and their whole mindset changed completely. It's like, wow, it's changed, like I didn't think of it like this completely, right? So, and I guess that's what I want to end with. The positive of black studies is, we've had black studies in this country for decades, and it's about making sure that we build it both in the institutions and outside the institutions, because it's absolutely essential for where we're going in the future.
Yeah.